1906, Carlo Scarpa was born in northern Italy, in a city called Venice. Much of his early childhood was spent in Vicenza, where his family relocated when he was 2 years old. 11 years later, the family returned to Venice after the death of the young Italian's mother. In 1926, 20-year-old Scarpa graduated from the Academy of Fine Arts in Venice. Thereafter, he became a lecturer at the Royal Superior Institute of Architecture in Venice and subsequently got involved in the production of Murano glassworks. Scarpa managed to produce renowned works and at the same time establish a rapid method with craftsmen. His experience in glass design would have been responsible for his affinity with the concept of detail that is so prevalent in his later works. At 42 years old, Scarpa chose to work as a consultant for the Biennale. Not only did his 24 years of service expose him to art and architecture globally, but it allowed for direct contact with international artists. In 1969, whilst still working for the Biennale, Scarpa was commissioned by the Brion family to design a memorial for Giuseppe Brion. In the design of Brion Cemetery, Scarpa wanted to show certain ways in which one could approach death in a social and civic way, and further what meaning there was in death and the ephemerality of life. With a span of over 2,000 square meters, Scarpa raised the land 75 centimeters above ground and fenced it with inwardly inclined walls at 60 degrees to the ground. This allowed those within the Brion Cemetery to observe the surrounding countryside. The Brion Monumental Complex at San Vito di Eltivo, Italy, was completed in 9 years' time. It was also the final and sole completed structure designed by Scarpa from scratch, as most of his previous works involved the reconstruction of old buildings. Scarpa died in 1978 at the age of 72 in a construction site accident. Today, overlooking Brion's house and the village church of St. Vito beyond the northern walls, lie the sarcophagi of Brion and his wife, cradled in arches of concrete, marble, and ebony beneath a mosaic-decorated vault. The Brion Cemetery is L-shaped in plan, with the tombs, the chapel, and the water pavilion taking each corner. The square chapel features an oblique entry, as Scarpa rotated the structure 45 degrees to the direction of entry. On the other hand, the water pavilion is marked out with steel cables. It is a large pool containing a meditation pavilion built in iron and spruce planking. The Brion Cemetery was mainly constructed with cast-in-place concrete. With that being said, Scarpa is particularly interested in the stratification of elements through spatial and material layering. Therefore, despite concrete being a plain element, Scarpa managed to reveal its beauty through spatial and material layering. Between different materials, intermixture is largely avoided, so that each part is assigned its own identity. A zigzag motif throughout Brion Cemetery is evident first and formally in its circulation. The side entrance into Brion Cemetery is designed to manipulate circulation, as the small entry path is dissociated from the main approach through paving patterns. The points at which a change in direction occurs throughout Brion Cemetery are sharp and emulate the zigzag pattern. In terms of form, the zigzag motif is evident especially in the chapel, wherein an ascending zigzag ceiling vault seems to drag the light outward and out through the apex, thereby creating a spiritual resonance through its association with the ancient religious ziggurat structure. Scarpa's use of form has always contained symbolic depth, whose interpretation is tied to a knowledge of his cultural sphere and range of interests. Scarpa studied Buddhism and believed in non-dualism, which points to the unity of two opposites. It is said that the overlapping circles near the entrance of Bryan Cemetery represent life and death, together and apart, male and female. The Bryan Cemetery also embodies an Oriental perspective on the idea of mortality, as death is portrayed to be a joyous reunion. This is shown by Scarpa's employment of the Chinese character that means double happiness. A character that is traditionally implied during a Chinese wedding was incorporated into the form of the concrete lattice in an open corner of the cemetery compound. Furthermore, water in the Bryan Cemetery symbolizes the unconscious and the unknown, thus implying both death and rebirth. The landscaping in Bryan Cemetery was mainly accomplished by Pietro Porcini, an Italian landscape architect who managed to create a strikingly harmonious whole between the landscape and its built components. Weeping, trailing, and cascading plants such as the weeping spruce and jasmine were strategically planted at the cemetery for a visually sympathetic effect. With no formal training as an architect, Scarpa sought inspiration from history and artists such as Piet Mondarian, besides the likes of Corbusier, Alto, and Wright, who were his predecessors in modern architecture. However, despite being a modernist at heart, Scarpa is also heavily influenced by the Venetian tradition, which is in fact historically linked to the Byzantine, Islam, and Orient traditions.
Lyste meg å kjenne